Hi, folks. I hope you are doing well. Eric from Hit Subscribe here with you this week, and I am doing yet another edition of the Freelancer Q&A Roundup. This week is actually going to be my last week in the Airbnb with all the messy setup in the background. Next week, I'll be on vacation, so I won't do one of these, but in 2 weeks, I will be in Hood River, Oregon, where I don't know what the background will look like. I'm in Arizona right now, and it occurs to me it's raining out there, which makes my light again not great. It's raining a lot for the desert here, but anyway, I never did do my outdoor setup, which I think would have been great, except for today. It's windy and raining. Anyway, the question today is I'm going to read this. It's actually like kind of two questions, a little bit longer. Is it better to refer to yourself as freelance or self-employed? Or should you call yourself something else? So that's the topic I'm going to tackle here today. I generally think of this as somewhat of a semantic decision or distinction. Like, I don't know if precision around this type of terminology is super important, except in terms of maybe number one, the self-confidence you have, and number two, the optics of the people that you're talking to, which does matter. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but it's not as though calling yourself one or the other of these might like somehow technically be incorrect and you're making a mistake or something. It's just more about how you're positioning yourself. So I will answer kind of what I think of these, which of the two I would call yourself, which will really kind of more depend on the nature of the business or practice. Although I probably wouldn't call myself either one of these personally. And that's in your position. I mean, I also wouldn't call myself these as me, Eric Dietrich, but as you, I wouldn't call yourself either one of these either, most likely. And I'll get into that in a second, but just let me offer this caveat, like your mileage may vary. This is just my opinion. I'm going to talk about like what comes to mind when I hear these terms. For me personally, what I would think of, when I hear somebody identify as something like this and introduce maybe some other terms that I would use. But again, this is all just like my stuff. Your mileage may vary, my opinion, but that is, after all, what you have asked for here. So caveat emptor. Let me start out with just offering, as a business owner, as somebody who's been a consultant, a management consultant, traveled to a lot of different organizations, had a lot of different jobs and roles. First of all, what do I think of when I hear these terms? So if you tell me that you're a freelancer, the thing that I think of immediately is you are somebody who does labor, a technician. You probably have an hourly rate and you do gigs. You do gigs in exchange for money. You get paid by the hour. There's a decent chance that you're on Upwork. I think of somebody who's either moonlighting or doing this full time, going from gig to gig, writing code or writing content or doing graphic design or something, generally by the hour. That's what comes to mind for a freelancer, a gig-based hourly worker. If you tell me that you're self-employed, there's some variance there in what goes through my mind. The first thing that might occur to me, although I would give people the benefit of the doubt, is you might just have a resume gap. So somebody tells me they're self-employed, and I think there is a chance that this is just an employee that can't find a job. And rather than say that, which isn't the best, it's, I've got some stuff going on. I'm a self-employed. Some people say they're a consultant when they say this. You'll occasionally hear a freelancer say it, but I don't really associate that with freelancers. I feel like people that are just unemployed and don't want to admit it, so to speak, don't tend to call themselves freelancers. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Anyway, if you tell me you're self-employed, that's not the first thing that my mind jumps to, but the possibility is there. The first thing that my mind jumps to is probably somebody who is starting a business and maybe intends to grow the business, but hasn't yet. So it's a way that somebody is signaling that they're in the process of getting traction with the business. That's the more common thing that I associate. You've quit your job. What do you do? Oh, I'm self-employed. There's no job title to speak of there. Instead, you're describing your arrangement with, I guess, yourself, but like your arrangement of being both the owner of a thing, a business, and an employee of the business, which given your coupling of those makes it sound like you're probably the only employee of a business that you intend to later have more employees for. So with that in mind, I guess let me talk through what I might refer to myself instead as if you're in either one of these situations. So if you're a freelancer, let me actually back up a moment. If you're a freelancer, you are self-employed. That is the correct designation. Like self-employment has a technical meaning, and it means that you work, well, I mean, I guess for yourself, but self-employed means that you are both owner and operator or a participant in the business. So you, the part of you that is doing the employing, employs you. Yeah, that was a horrible description. I'm sorry. Let me try it this way. You could sort of like bifurcate your brain, and you are both a business owner and an employee of that business, and that means being self-employed. So this would apply to a freelancer. Freelancers are self-employed. They don't have an employed job for somebody else. They own their practice. A self-employed would also apply to a consultant that didn't identify as a freelancer, like a solo consultant. Self-employed would also apply to somebody like a YouTuber or an influencer. Again, they're not working for somebody else. They're not collecting a paycheck and receiving a W-2. So a whole variety of people can be self-employed. You could also argue, probably correctly, I guess, given hit subscribe structure, that I am self-employed. I am the owner of a business, granted one that employs a bunch of folks and contractors and so on and so forth. But I am the owner of a business for which I am an actual salaried W-2 employee. So technically, I am also self-employed. Now, a business the size of Hit Subscribes, usually the owner of a business like that, or the CEO, or anyone with stake in it, is probably not going to refer to themselves as self-employed. You usually hear this when it comes to explaining a very small niche business or a practice like a freelancer or a consultant. So freelancer is a little more nebulous. Self-employed is pretty specific in terms of what it means and who qualifies, but it's a big umbrella of who would qualify. It's just anyone that owns the thing for which they also work. So, as kind of an aside, you wouldn't like, I wrote a book, I wrote a few books and I collect royalties for them. I wouldn't say that as the book writer, I am self-employed because there's no employment there. Sure, it's income, but I am the owner of the book and the property that generates the royalty income, but I'm not employed by that property. So that wouldn't apply. It is the situation where you both own a business enterprise and you work for it as a salaried employee or a worker of some kind. So with that in the books, and sorry to kind of like wander through that definition, I probably should have made notes a little better ahead of time, but I think getting the actual definition of those terms right is important because as a freelancer, should you call yourself freelancer or self-employed, technically you're both. So you can't exactly go wrong or be kind of a buffoon by calling yourself either one. There's no wrong answer. You are both of those things. As for which you should call yourself of the two, I probably calling yourself a freelancer if you're looking for freelance gigs is the better route, because if you say that you're self-employed, it won't be clear to the people you're talking to that you mean as a freelancer. You could mean that you're self-employed running a small business operation and you don't take on billable clients. So like the YouTube influencer is self-employed, and you wouldn't assume that that person would do like gig work for you. So I would call myself a freelancer out of simple pragmatism, maybe, so it's clear to people like what you're trying to do for a living and that you provide services. But let me address each of these terms in the position of somebody who's asking this question, the question asker and similar people who are freelancers. I would call myself a freelancer over explaining that I'm self-employed to anybody who might give you work. I guess if you're at a cocktail party and you think it sounds more impressive to say that I'm self-employed than I'm a freelancer, sure, go with it. It doesn't matter. The thing I would try to say and be instead of a freelancer is I'm a consultant. I think I've done a video about this before. I'll see if I can find it for YouTube if I have. But the challenge here is it's a little inaccurate and self-aggrandizing for you to be a freelancer and then just decide to call yourself a consultant because it sounds better. A consultant is something different than a freelancer. So in the beginning, I explained that a freelancer is generally somebody who, or at least I think of as somebody who takes in money, usually hourly, in exchange for labor. A consultant is not somebody who does labor, if we're applying the term correctly and precisely. A consultant takes in money and offers advice, sometimes by the hour, but often as a flat fee or a retainer, or maybe a value-based pricing kind of arrangement. So a consultant, crucially, has a deliverable of advice. A freelancer, typically a laborer, has a deliverable a deliverable of labor or hours or something like technician hours. So you can't just call yourself a consultant, but what I would recommend for anybody who's interested in making your practice more lucrative is that you aspire to be a consultant and set yourself on the path towards being a consultant. And then later you will correctly say that you are a consultant. You will also still be self-employed, so that's accurate. And I feel like it's maybe more appropriate when you're a consultant to describe yourself to prospects as self-employed. That said, I would still call myself a consultant. Maybe, as an interlude, a way that I would think of when you might call yourself self-employed versus when you might call yourself a freelancer or a consultant is if you're talking to entities like the IRS or a vendor who's doing your taxes or something, then explaining that you're self-employed is helpful. Your clients aren't going to care who owns the business, the logo that you're doing work under. So they don't really care whether you own it or somebody else owns it and you're an employee of it. You might care in how you're telling them, or it might, seem more impressive that you also own the business. But in terms of just the nuts and bolts of the deliverable, like the fact that you own and operate the business is not super interesting or relevant to your clients. So, as you freelance, I would aspire to at least, become a consultant, unless you just really like doing gig-based labor, and then go for it. I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody who likes that. I'm just saying if your goal is to grow equity in the business and maybe take on employees and kind of scale up and have a saleable asset or an asset from which you could backfill yourself and collect distributions, becoming a consultant rather than a freelancer is a good first step, and it's a bite-sized first step. If you start to take on subcontractors and then employees, or if you're growing an equity-based business and it starts to be more than just you, then you get into the area where you are neither a freelancer nor a consultant necessarily. Like, for instance, I wouldn't call myself a freelancer or consultant as the owner and titled CEO of HitSubscribe. Neither one of those things applies to me. Technically, I'm self-employed, as I mentioned, but I would refer to myself as a business owner or by my job title, which is CEO, with the payroll company and everything. So I would call myself one or two of those things. You, as a freelancer, if you're looking to start offering productized services, or if you're looking to roll out a SaaS or some kind of offering ladder or something like that, I would start to adjust and call myself probably a business owner rather than a self-employed person. Business owner or founder is a good way to go in the early going of building an equity type of business. So that's the term I would use if I were you and you're looking to take on workers, grow the business beyond being a solo operator. So to summarize, in the position the question asker is in, I would call myself a freelancer. I would aspire to try to maybe become a consultant and then even graduate from that into being a business owner or a founder when you're looking to make a kind of equity play. And what I mean by equity play is building up SOPs or automation or something where the business runs and takes in revenue while you're not actively doing anything. So if you are a freelancer or a consultant, the only time you're earning money is when you are actually delivering your services to clients. Once you start to take on subcontractors who do work and you're taking a margin off the top of that, you are earning money even though you're not directly laboring. Likewise, if you put some like calculator up on your website that people can sign up for or something, that can operate. You've created this automation that can exist and do its thing without you actively doing anything. Once you start doing things of that nature, once the business can generate income sustainably, in a way where you're not directly involved, that's when you start to have equity in the business. So as you make a play towards equity, you start to become a founder or a business owner. And then in my book, I'd say once you start to take on employees, this is where I would start to adopt a title like CEO. If it's your business and you're the owner of it and you're also the one to whom everybody reports, then I think once you start getting salaried folks on your payroll, it's appropriate to title yourself CEO, because you are probably going to give those early hires leadership titles underneath you. And having something like, I don't know what you might call yourself in a service page. Like, I don't know. I guess you could call yourself the managing director or something like that. You should give yourself some kind of title for the business that indicates executive, because that's what you are. You are the executive, you're the decision maker, and people are reporting into you. So to summarize here, first of all, should you call yourself a freelancer or self-employed? You are self-employed, so that's true, but I would only explain that to probably people at cocktail parties if you want to sound impressive, but like to your CPA or something, or the IRS. Otherwise, I would refer to yourself as a freelancer. I would aspire to become a consultant, and then, or maybe instead, become a self-described founder or business owner from there. And I would probably use those terms more than self-employed if I were you. Once you qualify as a consultant or then a business owner or a founder, I would use all of those terms over self-employed personally. And then finally, once you start taking on salaried folks, I would amend your title to probably CEO or maybe managing director or something of that nature. And yes, you are still self-employed if you're doing that, but then I would just use that title on your business cards, if that's still a thing, or LinkedIn or whatever. So hopefully that kind of clears up a lot of different titular things that you might do with yourself when you are a newbie business owner and looking to take your practice or business in various directions. And once again, I do want to round out this by saying I don't mean to throw any shade at somebody who's a freelancer. It has its ups and downs. There are a lot of people, though, that can earn a living for 20, 30, however many years, being perfectly happy to freelance and do gig-based work. That you love the variety, you love the lack of people reporting to you, and the kind of solo operator and all that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. All of the advice about both title and progression through consulting, through business ownership, through founder, through CEO is really if you are aiming to build an equity property in your business. You don't have to aim to do that, but if you are, then that's the advice I'm giving you, both about what to be and what to call yourself during that progression. So hopefully that helps and makes some semblance of sense, and I will catch you all next time.